Palmer. She is going to give us a talk on engineering biology at social scales. Dr. Megan Palmer from Stanford University. She is the Executive Director of Biopolicy and Leadership Initiatives at Stanford University. Dr. Megan J. Palmer is the Executive Director of Biopolicy and Leadership Initiatives at Stanford University. And in this role, Dr. Palmer leads integrated research, teaching and engagement programs to explore how biological science and engineering is shaping our societies, and to guide innovation to serve public interests. Based in the Department of Bioengineering, where she is also an adjunct professor, she works closely both with groups across the university and with stakeholders in academia, government, industry, and civil society around the world. Please join me to welcome Dr. Megan J. Palmer to give us the next talk.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited to join this meeting. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm joining you from California. It's just after 5 a.m. here, and I've enjoyed some of the presentations so far. I'm going to try and project my slides here. Just give me one moment. Thanks so much. So today I'm going to talk about engineering biology at social scale. This will touch upon some topics that others have also spoken about. So in many ways, we're gathered here to talk about the transformations that are occurring at the molecular scale in our abilities to read, write, edit, and evolve biological systems with increasing ease, working across digital and physical spaces. But these are also leading to pretty radical transformations at the social and the global scale. This is one example from the iGEM competition over the course of 15 years, going from a very small group to hundreds of teams from dozens of countries all over the world working together to explore what we might do with engineering biology and synthetic biology. This has also led to different narratives and concerns about whether or not synthetic biology is going to be saving or destroying the world seemingly simultaneously, and whether or not we should be happy or worry. Of course, there's some seeded truth of these types of concerns and hopes because there's some real policy puzzles when it comes to the capacity to engineer biological systems. Some of these are in safety and security, as we are discussing today, but there's also puzzles around things that we might make that cause other types of harms that don't fit neatly into existing buckets. There's similar types of questions that come out every time we face these types of puzzles. What exactly are we creating? Is it creating new concerns? Does it fit within or break the current rules? Do we need to be adapting these rules? And probably the most difficult challenge is who exactly will do it? These are questions we've been facing for a long time in this field and fields before it. These are just a couple examples of where those conversations have been tackled. On the left is now 45 years ago at the Asilomar conference, 40 years after that at these international conversations, this case around human genome engineering. This is, I believe, the first summit. And as we're seeing today, and as highlighted in the last presentation, these conversations are global, and the community is quite global. And they're occurring both in policy circles and within our science and technology communities. And the real question is how, when, and where do these meet? I'm really excited to see this community and this conference because I think it's an opportunity to rethink how we organize, where we organize, what types of rules we need, what type of people we need. I think there'll be many fruitful conversations that, again, I wish I was part of in person, but hope to join the following year's conferences. Of course, these, again, are not without precedent. And a lot of my work, even though I'm trained as a biological engineer, I've been working not on engineering organisms, but how do we think about engineering organizations? And what do they teach us about how we work across these different scales? These are just a few examples. I think many of them are highlighted in the conversations and the presentations you'll have over the next few days. But there's a question of, how will the groups here work together? Will new organizations need to form? Will they need to branch out or converge over time? My one message for all of this is I think, need to take an experimental mindset, embracing this experimental approach in the same ways that we experiment in designing, building, and testing our organisms in order to build organisms for useful purposes. We need to think about how we are building our organizations and think about, how might the ways we govern ourselves reflect the way we govern ourselves. To ground this a little bit, I thought I would highlight some of the work that I've been doing with many other people over now more than a decade, primarily in the context of iGEM, but also in many other places, that have tried to combine these communities that are working to develop and adapt policies and rules, test them in real time in settings like iGEM, as well as develop new ways to actually learn from our experiments, collecting both anecdotes as well as systematic data about when we change incentives, when we change rules, when we provide new tools, what actually happens. One of the key enablers of that has been to be open with a lot of our policies and procedures and our data, to welcome others in learning with us about what we should do. We lead a team here at Stanford that helps out with many of these efforts called the Biopolicy and Practices Lab. And then we're working with iGEM as well as many other organizations in order to develop these types of real-time experiments in governance. So I thought I would just, in the remaining few minutes, talk a little bit about iGEM and some of the things that we've learned through that. So this is just one picture, actually from several years ago. This was 2015. It's very hard to get everybody in the same screenshot these days. And you'll see the excitement and enthusiasm of this group. I think you'll be hearing from several other iGEM groups through the next few days. As you mentioned, this is, these teams come from many places, but certainly not all places. And there's a question of what else we need to be doing to have everybody be participating. iGEM has, I think, done several things very well over time in terms of enabling this experimental mindset. One has been providing tools that can expand and enable others to contribute over time. But the other thing beyond tools is enabling rules, rules that can grow and can change over time. So one of the ways that the innovations that was really important is not just having a requirement to follow rules, but rather a requirement to actually innovate on those rules, both in designing the technologies as well as designing your practices. These have become part of the medals and awards within iGEM, and there's an increasingly sophisticated safety and security element to this that has grown into its own aspect that has its own rewards and systems. And of course, it's not just about compliance, but rather, again, providing these incentives. So we're awarding innovation and not just breaking or bending the rules or following the rules, but actually coming up with innovative new ways in which those rules might be designed and employed across an increasingly global community. I think I would argue that this has been very important to ensuring that we safeguard all the beneficial applications. So this is just one example of the different application areas and tracks over time with iGEM as they've grown and proliferated. And each of these different applications, it requires its own set of modified and adapted rules over time. And of course, I think it's going to be highlighted later. Many of these are looking at major global challenges. But in addition to, tools and rules, the most important thing I think has been people. Again, who is going to be helping to lead and develop these changes? And I hope this conference will continue to foster more communities like this that are excited not just about the technology innovations, but also about the policy innovations that are coupled to them. And are centering these values around responsibility and teamwork, including safety and security in practice. I'll highlight a few examples I won't have time to go into that highlight the ways in which iGEM has become a really important test bed for adapting the types of safety and security and social responsibility policies over time. There's descriptions here, one led by Pierce Millett, another one that highlights this experimentation in biosecurity governance led by Sam Evans, and one on the right here around the topic of dual use in particular, talking about the need for being open and developing innovations in our approaches as we confront some of the most difficult challenges. Just lastly, we're also doing a project that's actually looking at more systematic data and how can we begin to build data-driven approaches to these questions. Happy to talk about that at another time. So again, the last thing, as we look at engineering, biology, and social scales, the most important thing is thinking about an experimental mindset to design, build, and test. And thank you so much for having me today. I look forward to engaging you further.